This video will just answer the question, what's the best aperture for wedding photography? It's a little bit of a trick question because it kind of depends. There's not one aperture for wedding photography, but my answer is the best aperture for wedding photography is the aperture that you need to create the image that you want to create. What that means is if you're looking for a shallow depth of field and a beautiful bokeh effect for a portrait, you're going to want a low aperture. If you're looking for a nice wide image where all the wedding guests are sharp, you're going to want a higher aperture, maybe 5.6, maybe even higher depending on how big the group is. So aperture is a camera setting that you're using creatively to decide the depth of field. If the depth of field isn't as important, then aperture is the setting that you're choosing based on the amount of light that you need to let into the camera through that little opening. And a lot of times you're going to want a wide aperture, low f-stop number like 1.8 in order to let in as much light as possible so that you don't compromise dynamic range by having too high of an ISO, or so that you don't compromise by having too slow of a shutter speed that you get motion blur. So if you're not using aperture creatively, you might be using it to balance with your shutter speed and your ISO. If you need more about that exposure triangle and what you really need to know, check out my video that I did on that. Something like 1.8 or 2 is a go-to for that bokeh effect. Something like 4 or 5.6 is better for group photos. And then beyond that, you're choosing something based on what kind of look you want to create, bokeh, sun flare, or anything like that. Here's a photo example of a low aperture photo. Here's an example of using a higher aperture creatively. Here's an example of taking a photo in low light conditions because of having a low aperture fast lens. I hope that helps. I look forward to hearing your question in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all of that.